Hello and welcome. This is Diana from thisisdiana.com and the Design Your Life with Beauty. And welcome to another show under the genre of I Sense Rude People. I'm a psychic empath and I sense rude people. Today's edition is going to be all about communication. What can possibly go wrong? And this is a topic that I'm sure you can relate to because we all move in this world in the form of communication with each other and with ourselves. So briefly, we're going to be talking about just sort of the forms of communication that we engage in on the everyday to-day basis. And I will specifically go into what I call the last time, oh no you didn't moments, examples of communication types and styles that cramps our style, our life, our harmony by being rude and inappropriate and mean and disrespectful, the whole category. Hopefully by now you've had the opportunity to check the website thisisdiana.com and see the scale that I created that talks about just a little bit of rudeness all the way up to incredibly dangerous rude behavior. That is the whole range of behaviors that we experience on an everyday basis when it comes to communication. And I welcome your feedback. I want you to let me know if you feel you resonate with some of these, if I missed any, if you have any specific examples. You can contact me and I'm happy to bring it up on a future program, on a future episode. But for now, we're going to get into this whole topic of communication, personal and general communication, and how so much can go wrong. See, we're living in a world with tons of information sources coming from every direction. You have to know how to filter some of these and figure out what's important and what isn't important, how to function effectively. Otherwise, we'll become numb, overwhelmed, or completely disconnected. So what happens is, however, we become accustomed to getting the most minimal amount of information we think we can get away with, and we may lose critical, useful information we may need, but we don't realize that because we're in such a hurry and we think something else isn't important and it might be important for the purposes of context. So it's important for us to become self-aware and take a deep breath and say, am I rushing this conversation? What am I missing? What critical thinking, and also, as usual, common sense and gut instinct. So again, we have all these types of communication, verbal, visual communication that comes person to person, that comes via technology. Phone, computers, written. So there are all these forms of communication, and that's when we have to know when to use, reasonable heuristics, which are shortcuts, to understand and decipher what's important and what isn't. And this is your time. This is your way of communicating. I think it's absolutely worth it to do this. So, and I put this here because communication, or let me be more specific, miscommunication, what we say, what we do, how we react, is at the core of so much misunderstanding, and so much judgment, and so much of what we can come across as performing as a rudeness or interpret as rudeness coming from someone else. It could be a simple miscommunication. So self-awareness is one of the huge goals I want to impart in any of this. And as we were saying, again, these ways of communicating, for example, you're hearing a broadcast or a podcast. So you're hearing, you may go to the website. For the hearing impaired, you just might want to read it. So that's seeing, touching if you use Braille. So there's all kinds of communication methods that we use, and we use some of them at the same time. And so how easy it is for us to become overwhelmed and want to just kind of cut the noise down. Again, knowing what to cut down and what not to cut down, what's important, what to decipher is a very huge skill that we have to develop. Discernment and discrimination in the sense that discriminating what is important and what isn't important. So in this whole field of communication. I mean, there's so much complexity, and we still have so much to learn about effective communication. So whether you're in person or chatting or videoing or imaging, there's so much opportunity to misunderstand things. A lot of people that are in the communication field or want to get their message across want to get it across effectively and quickly. They're not necessarily thinking of being kind or well-mannered. In fact, I think it's a whole explosion at the current moment of people being extremely rude, being very harsh, being nasty, bitter, and miserable, abusive. And that's a way they feel they're getting their message across. And you know what? Unfortunately, in a lot of ways, it's working. A lot of people are reacting to it, whether it be positively or negatively. I think that's leading people in the wrong direction, because again, then we'll make assumptions about what people are trying to say, and the miscommunication will increase. This is what we want to do. We want to reduce it, not increase it. So it's very possible to be effective and accurate and still be kind and mannered and appropriate or neutral. And some things are not being about flowery and nice, but when it comes to specifically getting a very important message across, or a message between family, friends, associates, colleagues, strangers, in any form, it's important to pay attention when they're communicating, and be clear when you're the one doing the communicating, and listen to each other, or pay attention to each other, whatever sense you're using, whatever it is. So we're going to switch into some of the oh no moments, and some of these are, take it with a grain of salt. Some of them are kind of funny, some of them are a little bit inappropriate, but either one you may find relevant, that you have experienced or experience on a daily basis, and it might be causing so much frustration for you, or it may be something that you see or observe in other people and you want to stop it, everybody, or let's do more of this. Maybe it's good communication, effective communication, positive communication, useful, meaningful, that you want to get across. So let's get right to it. So these oh no you didn't moments. This is going to sound a little obvious, but what about the experience of not actually listening when somebody is speaking to us? Like, you could be pretending you're hearing or listening, but you're not. This is really common, and one of the most common ones actually. How many times have you had or been in a conversation with someone and you noticed that you were doing all the listening and the other person was doing all the talking? Sure, if this happens once in a while, it's okay, because it happens. We're human. Sometimes we need to balance out who's doing the talking, who's doing the listening. But if it happens all the time with the same person, or just as a pattern that you're noticing, then something's not right. Something is amiss. That's not communication. That's just somebody spewing in this and sending a one-way transmission. So you need to find a way of communicating, I may use that word, to the person, that there has to be some more of an equilibrium. It has to be a situation where there's listening in both directions. Otherwise, you're just not going to be communicating. Now, there's an exception to everything. If you're perfectly happy just listening and letting the person talk, and this is a relationship you've developed, by all means, that's fine. But most of us want to make it more of an equal platform where we're being listened to, and we also want to hear what the person is saying, depending on the context of the conversations. So it's all about bringing balance to conversation in general. If you think that's bad, how about just not listening at all? Like, you're talking, that was talking, saying something important, and then you realize the person wasn't listening to you at all. And then you finished, and they were like, right, what did you say? But in the meantime, as you're talking, they're saying all the right cues to let you think that they're listening, like, right, really, go on. But the whole time they've been doing something else. They've been either on their computer, or on their phone, on their device, or just looking around, or nodding, or even looking at you and nodding and not really listening. Again, if this happens all the time, it's kind of important to address it. it is important to address it. There's no kinda about it, because this is not communication. And this stuff builds up after a long time, and relationships start to wither if you have this type of minimal exchange and not meaningful exchange. And along the same lines, we have the issue of talking too long. Sometimes people just don't stop talking. If you know me at all, I used to do a lot of phone work, crisis hotline or counseling, customer service. And, when you've done that kind of work, you really don't want to be on the phone at other times. And sometimes I would have people or friends, and you may relate to this, where they just love to talk. They love to chat on the phone or wherever it is, and it just goes on and on and on. It's not really anything particularly important. They just may be bored, or maybe find that they think it's what makes their life, important, or to just be talking with someone, or chatting, or texting, or messaging. But in order for things to be effective and meaningful, there has to be balance. And I'm going to say that over and over again. If you talk too long, it just becomes something you dread. You don't want to do anymore. You don't want to listen to this person, because what are you doing? I mean, are these important long messages that are, meaningful? Are they succinct? Are they respectful? Or are you just taking somebody else's time? I mean, just because you're bored, or you're lonely, or, you think they're lonely. So there might be something to be said about expediency. Just get your point, talk. If you want to talk about particular things, you want to laugh, you want to watch a show together, I mean, it's your business, it's your choice. But keep that in mind when talking to another person. Some people don't want to be rude, and they'll just let you talk forever, but that's when you have to have boundaries, of course. But if you don't have boundaries, then it's important to be self-aware and say, well, maybe I'm taking too much of this person's time, and let the conversation go. Okay, and that's not the most serious thing in the world. There are other things that are much more serious when it comes to rudeness and miscommunication, in general. And one of those things are the whole thing about when you are having a conversation with a client, a person, a friend, a colleague, a stranger, whatever, giving bad advice. Some of the advice could be unsolicited, that advice, and all of a sudden people become so-called experts in things. All of a sudden they become know-it-alls, and they fancy themselves as experts in everything. These people range from a nosy neighbor to the local preacher to just somebody you just ran into while commuting. And they just put themselves in this role of leadership, or it might be you that's doing this. We may have been in this position ourselves at one point. But the truth is that we should know, sometimes if you're going to give advice, make sure that you know what you're talking about, that you are accurate, whether it's about your relationships or health issues or general comments about life or whatever it is. Know what you're talking about, or give the person a warning. Listen, I'm not really sure about this. Please make sure you decide for yourself. This might be, my opinion, etc. Because that goes a long way. And on the same lines, being careless about what you're saying to someone can really, really, really be hurtful. You've heard about this before. This is pretty serious on the rudeness scale, actually. Really saying something because, you're not really thinking about the effect it could have on a person. It cause a lot of pain. There's a tremendous amount of harm you can do to somebody when you say something to someone and not use a level of sensitivity. That you can communicate the point without hurting their feelings. This is really common as well. And so this, along with the fact of being the expert and the critic, some people think that it's really smart to just criticize everything and point all the negative things out. That's also not a way of communicating effectively. It's just showing off something that's probably not even true. Along the same lines, we have the same situation where you have people that are jumping to conclusions and being very judgmental about something you say without really hearing you out. Again, this is all connected to not really paying attention or listening carefully. On the other side, you making your point not clear. Make sure that you put everything in context and you say it in a way, and ask questions if you have any doubt. Well, is this what you mean? What do you mean by that? So, it's important to have, clarity when communicating. Some people just have really bad timing when it comes to communicating. So, for example, you could pick the worst times. You want to support them in their time of need. This could be when they're sick, or they're in crisis, or their loved one or an animal companion dies, and you just say the wrong thing, like, "Oh, you're gonna be fine. Oh, you can get another kid. Oh, you can get another pet. Don't worry, there's work out there. Hey, you can always try unemployment." And some of these things are really harmful. They're detrimental to I don't think anybody wants to hear that. Like, if you tell somebody, "Oh, I've just been diagnosed with this, illness or disease," you don't want to hear somebody say, "You're young, you'll heal," or, "Well, what did you do to get that?" Somebody put the blame on you for having it, or, "It'll be fine, just go to this doctor and it'll be," sometimes telling them, "Wow, how can I help you?" might be a better way. Or, "Is there anything I can do?" And if the person says, "Oh, just hear me out for this," then hear them out. You don't always have to give advice or your opinion. Sometimes the conversation could be something else, about politics or religion or something else that's very loaded. Lately, and in the last few years, politics have been the root cause. Well, I wouldn't say politics, but the way people are reacting to politics are the root cause of a lot of strife, hate, anger, marriages ending, friendships ending, wars being waged. I mean, it's not the first time in our history that's happened, but it's happening. We're in a little flare-up at the moment, where people are, number one, very nosy about what a political point of view somebody else may have, very judgmental about it. If somebody does answer you, they can be very aggressive and attack the person about their belief system, very super hard-headed or rigid about their belief system. We could be wrong. We have to admit there's a possibility we could be wrong about a situation, a belief system. We do become vested and invested in belief systems throughout our life. So it's understandable somebody can be resistant. Any of us can be resistant to a new point of view. But to keep an open mind, open enough to at least be receptive and say, have I been, maybe times are changing, maybe circumstances are changing, contexts are changing. That could go a long way in stopping the aggression, the negativity that has been going on for just so long lately. Again, specifically, we need more consciousness, more breath, more patience. We need more Zen. So yes, I hope you took that opportunity to take a deep breath like I did. So, along the lines of this, we can also talk about another faux pas and rudeness that we can do in the form of communication. And this is a big one, actually, and is when people use communication to bully and misuse their power. This is a big thing, and this is something that's going to go on in many, many different examples. We can talk about it. We can spend days, years talking about how people find ways of communicating with people that is abusive and bullying because of some of the things we talked about in a previous episode. Why are people rude in the first place? They may feel disempowered. They may feel fear. They may feel enjoyment out of it. Whatever the reason is, people are using communication to really harass and bully people. And that's something that is unacceptable in all its forms. And we have to find ways, and we are finding ways of curtailing that. And again, if you have any questions, opinions about that specifically, let's talk about it, because that's really important. Another thing that we do is, we may have all been guilty of this at one point or another, is talking about someone when they are there, not just when they're not there, but when they are there and they can hear you or see you. I mean, this is really, use your head, use your mind, use your heart. If you can talk about something and someone mentions something about someone, and hello, I mean, you shouldn't be talking negatively about people anyway, ideally, right? One of the 5 virtues and 5 vices, or 7, excuse me. Okay, I'm not a mathematician. We talked about the vices and the 7 virtues in the previous episode. So some of them is, please don't talk about someone when they're not there because they can't defend themselves. So in this particular case, I think another vice is talking about somebody when they are there and they can't defend themselves. Attacking them, for example, or, hijacking the conversation and saying something insulting about them. Either way, restrain yourself, control yourself. How would you like it done to you? I don't think any of us would. And if you do, then maybe you might want to talk to somebody about that, like a professional. Also, I think something that people do that they don't realize this, in a super multicultural world that some of us live in, somebody might start talking in a native language, in their particular native language of someone else that speaks their language, and not realize that other people are in their presence that don't speak that language, and without even excusing or giving a reason or anything like that. I think that's so rude. I've been around that so many times, and I don't care what language it is. It's, if you just start going on a conversation, you're sitting there like third or fourth wheel saying, okay, what's going on here? And especially they're laughing. You don't know what they're saying. It might have nothing to do with you, but you don't know that. They might be making fun of you. They may be calling you names in their language. Either way, it is rude to start talking to like family members or friends or other people from your particular culture and ignore that there are other people there when they're in the conversation. If you're having your own private conversation and it's nothing to do with with a customer or nothing to do, and you're speaking very briefly and it's just a way of being effective at that moment, again, there's always an exception, there's always a loophole, there's always a reason for things. So none of these are hard, stone cold rules. I mean, they're just guidelines and they're just opinions that we can follow to have harmonious communication. Along the same lines, for those who speak and like to talk, volume. Speaking too loudly or speaking too softly to the point where we're not listening or hearing each other. If you're talking so loud that everybody hears you, and this is something I've observed a trillion times, and you can't even do your own thing. I mean, I've gone to coffee shops, for instance, where people are not just talking at normal volumes, they're like screaming their conversations to each other, and you're there just kind of having your tea or coffee or your meal or whatever, and you want to do a little work, you want to read, or you want to listen to a voicemail or a message on your phone, or have your own meeting with someone else, even in person. You can't hear it because somebody's in the background screaming, blah, 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 what are you doing? And it goes on and on and on. I mean, a long, full conversation. I mean, watch your volume, or sometimes too slow or too low that you can't hear you. That's also tough. So make sure they can hear you, you're at a proper volume, and it might take practice, but it can be done. So far, can you relate to any of these thus far, to this moment? Can you think of a situation? I have a few more for you, just a few more, and then we can wrap this particular episode up, and you can think about it and see, hey, this has happened to me, or maybe we can do this to make this better. If you speak more than one language, or you speak a foreign language, it might be possible that you might have a very strong accent, and in some of these cases, we might be aware of it, we may not, but if you are, please just think about this. If you're trying to speak another language that's not your native language, there's a possibility that your accent's pretty strong, or so strong that may not be able to understand you. And this is really tricky because you may not be able to control some of this to a certain extent, but that's a matter of just taking practice. Because if you're not able to be understood, then you're not communicating. So whether you speak, I've spoken to people that have a Russian accent or a Spanish accent, Portuguese, whatever it is, Portuguese accent, and you're really trying to listen to them, and they're not only speaking super strongly with their accent, but they're very fast speakers, and you don't want to interrupt them, or you don't want to, and you might hear some words make sense of them, and then the other one, that's a lot of work, and you may miss some very important parts of the conversation. So how do we address this? We need to talk about it honestly. It is what it is. It's not about being offensive. It's about saying, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulties understanding you. Can you slow down or tell me in a different way? That's just one example of that. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something slightly different about when it comes to speaking, like on the speaking side of things. The tone for which you speak says a lot. There are people that, for some reason, are in their group, their social group, wherever they may come from, a regional issue. I'm not talking about accents necessarily, although I guess it could be sort of an accent, but a form of, or a tone or a rhythm of speaking that is so distracting that it's plain annoying. And it might have something to do with their intonation. So I'm sure you've heard of this. People call it like the valley talk, the valley, oh, she sounds from the valley, but it's a lot more than that. It sounds singy, songy, like a question mark at the end of it, or saying like too much, like I just said, using the word like too much, or really, really, really squeaky voice. Some of us really, we've gotten so used to just talking and not trained in communicating effectively that we don't realize that we're really hurting other people's eardrums. We really are. It's very painful to hear a certain pitch of somebody's voice, or a very squeaky sounding voice, or very low, contracted voice on a regular basis that that could be controlled somewhat. I'm not talking about because of there's some organic, physiological issue. Those we deal with. We have to deal with those. That's fine. But people that they think they sound smart and sophisticated, but they don't. They sound silly. And it's not sassy or cute. It's annoying. Be aware of your tone or your pace, the volume, the pitch. Too high or too low, we lose the ability to really communicate effectively. And again, this or could happen to any of us, especially if we're in public and crowded places. Our voice is going to go up and higher, depending on where we are. Or sometimes we're in a quiet place. We might change our tone, but that's all temporary and contextual. That's not a problem. But if we do it on a regular basis, it becomes an issue with communicating effectively. And along those same lines is using a lot of words. Even as I do this podcast, I'm always aware that I might be using a word that is repetitive to the point where it's annoying, and it happens. And for that, I apologize. But I know that other people go through it too. I see it all the time on television, on the newscasts, or hear it in other podcasts. And I'm sure you've heard it too. And it's overuse of certain words as fillers. We know the classic yeah, right? But this can become, that crazy overused word vocabulary can get really big if we don't start paying attention. The word like is very addictive. I myself still struggle with this. And I don't use it as much as I hear other people using it. But they use it every single time they utter the word like comes out. It's really difficult to curtail that. So be aware of that first. Then start minimizing it. If you say like, okay, at least you're aware, but say, it takes time and practice to develop a new habit and get rid of an old habit. So it's going to take time, but boy, are we all going to thank you if you stop saying like every 2 seconds. Amazing is another word. It's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing. We lost the meaning of the word amazing because we're saying it so much. Not everything's amazing, or not everything's totally, or yeah, right, kinda, sorta, all this stuff. There's always new ones coming out. Wicked, all these terms that come out, and they're okay for a little while if they're making their point, but if it's said all the time, it's really annoying. Now, this is not necessarily the next one I'm going to talk about, and we're almost done with the "oh no you didn't" categories. But when we're close to each other and we are communicating in person, just be aware of our hygiene. So, how is our breath? Did we just eat a garlic, sandwich, or do we smell like cigarette breath or coffee breath? Just be aware, and if it's something that just happens once in a while, it happens. We're all human, we all eat, and that's going to happen. But if you're chronically known for having bad breath, and it's something, for example, hygienic, like something to do with your gums or teeth, chronic issue, then it might be a health thing going on. So I would consider, if you're aware of it for yourself, of course, finding out if you can get some help, assistance with that from a health professional, or just be more mindful of your personal hygiene, or keeping your distance a little bit, communicating with someone sometimes uncomfortable to say that you yourself have this issue, and it's even 10 times more harder to say when somebody else has the issue. What are you going to say? Hey, your mouth smells, ooh, you stink. You're not going to say that, for the most part. But if somebody has a chronic issue, somehow, some way, we have to communicate that with them, even if it means in a third-party form, meaning that talk about it in general, and hopefully they'll make an awareness. If not, the worst-case scenario is to be direct if it's really, really an issue. And it can be. It's just not healthy, especially if you're talking to somebody who's a spitter. These days, if you're a germaphobe, like many of us are, when you talk, you spit. It's a natural thing. It's like it happens, and some of us are more spitters than others. So you want to make sure that your mouth is clean, and that you use mouthwash, brush your teeth, floss, scrape your tongue as much as possible. If you really are tremendous, seriously mouth spitter, then you just might want to keep your distance a few, several inches or a few feet from the person, and just let them know, I'm a spitter. Laugh about it. Humor fixes everything. So along those lines, the same thing as far as the breath and all that, it's this body odor, and that could be another thing. We're human after all. We are a combination of organic matter, physical components, biology, and so forth. And there are times where we are going to, if our hygiene is not ideal, we're going to have a smell that's disturbing to other people. So, of course, focus on your health. Make sure you're okay health-wise. Check your hygiene. Make sure that you are cleaning and bathing yourself if and when appropriately. I'm not talking about somebody who's in a third world country doesn't have access to water. That's not what I'm talking about. If you are in a modern society, and there's no reason, unless there's some mental illness or physical situation going on, that we shouldn't take that extra moment to wipe, swipe, wet, shower, soap up. And it definitely goes a long way in containing diseases and infections. If you're sitting and listening to this and saying, oh my God, this is exactly what's going on right now. We have an epidemic or a pandemic of this particular virus or bacteria or parasite. It's because at the core of it, humans are doing things they should not be doing with our environment, or they're not doing enough of something, which is cleansing, cleaning, being mindful of themselves and their environment. So this is it. This is the brunt of it. This is, of course, there are many more than I tell you. Please let me know if I missed something. Let me know. Do you resonate with some of these? Does this make sense? What is this? How are these compare in the rude scale? From rarely rude to dangerously rude to kind of rude once in a while. Or I've been guilty of this. Oh my. Or oh my God, I know somebody who does this all the time. What solutions can we come up with? Should we write them up? Should we remind people somehow, some way? What can we do to make this life more harmonious when it comes to communicating, so that we are listening to each other, we are paying attention, we are visually or acoustically or tactually, with feeling, listening and paying attention and communicating. This is a way to reduce rudeness in our society, increase beauty, reduce stress, chronic illnesses and ailments of our life. So let me know what you think. Please do check thisisdiana.com. Let me know a particular topic or a particular issue that we may have discussed here that you want to know more about. Opinions, suggestions, or something I may have missed, which I'm sure I probably did. And let's cure rudeness for sure. Everyone all the time, and make society a more beautiful place. So with that said, I wish you wholeness, and thank you for listening to This is Diana. I sense rude people, and I'll see you next time.